欢迎来到理想的财富自由频道，一起听书致富。记得订阅、点赞、加分享。
For those of us on the other side of the table, we get barraged with information, and I'm wondering how do you both, do you just read annuals, 10Ks, and talk to people and ignore everything else, and how do you keep track of everything intellectually?
Well, we don't keep track of everything, but the beauty of, to some extent, of evaluating businesses, large businesses, is that it is all cumulative. I mean, if you started doing it 40 or so years ago, you really have got a working knowledge of an awful lot of businesses, but there aren't that many to start with that are, and you can get a fix. What are there, 75 maybe or so important industries, and you'll get to understand how they operate, and you don't have to start over again every day, and you don't have to consult a computer for it or anything like that. So it has the advantage of accumulation of useful information over time, and you just add the incremental bit at some point. Why did we decide to buy Coca-Cola in 1988? Well, it may have been just a couple of small incremental bits of information, but that came into a mass that had been accumulated over decades, and it's a great business that way. It's why we like businesses that don't change too much, because the past is useful to us. Charlie?
I can't add a thing to that.
Mr. Munger, I am intrigued by your marshalling of the Commodore and Aristotle to support your points. Very few of today's money managers would or could do that. Could you elaborate on what role a study of history of civilization plays in developing a sound investment philosophy? Thanks.
Well, I don't want to praise Aristotle too much. He was the one who thought that women had a different number of teeth from men and never looked in his wife's mouth.
Maybe his wife did.
I'm all in favor of a good general education, and I think it helps investment performance, and it helps business performance, and it helps one be a better citizen. And some of the things people say are quite memorable, and therefore they're helpful to the mind by the very ease with which they're remembered. And I think you'd be surprised how many bright investment professionals could talk a lot about Aristotle or even people I can't stand, like Hegel.
You want to quote a little more from anybody?
No.
Reinforce your...
Oh, one of my favorite quotations in the whole world is from Einstein. He says, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no more simple. And I think that describes the reality that we all face.
Charlie's favorite, though, is Ben Franklin. That's probably true, isn't it, Charlie?
Yeah.
We get more from Ben than anybody else. Keep thy shop and it will keep thee, that sort of thing. I mean, we're loaded with that stuff.
3 removes are as good as a fire. It's hard for an empty sack to stand upright. That's the Bible around Berkshire.
Yeah.
I once heard Warren say, the reason I'm so financially conservative is I don't want to find out how badly I might behave if I were stretched.
I think we better cut him off here. Zone 2, you better cut the thumping there.
Yeah.
My name is Stanley Watkins, and from Manhattan, Kansas, and I'm a shareholder. And I have 2 questions, and the first one I know the answer, so you can just say yes or no. Would you consider investing in indexes such as OEX pure speculation? You're going to say yes. And number 2, would you encourage investors to, if they were trying to get a lot of their investment, to use leaps on investments such as Coca-Cola instead of buying the stock?
Use what on? I missed that.
Leaps.
Leak?
Leaps. L-E-A-P-S.
Oh, I see. We're still on options. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, both the questions relate to futures of one sort, calls or whatever they may be, and I think that investors should stick to buying ownership in businesses. It's not that you can't come up with a theoretical argument for buying, say, I mean, if you think Coca-Cola is attractive, you can say, well, I'd rather buy a 5-year option on Coke than buy the stock directly because it introduces leverage without the risk of going broke. But I think that that's a dangerous path to start down, because if it works well, it's dynamite to start playing with things that can expire and become worthless, or can be bought with very low margin, as the OAX options you were talking about. Borrowed money usually or frequently leads to trouble, and it's not necessary. I mean, if you had some compelling reason, if you had to double your money by the end of the year or be shot, then I would head for the futures market, because you need to do it. I mean, you have to introduce borrowed money, but you really ought to figure out how you can be happy with the present amount of money you've got, and then figure that everything else is all to the good as you go along. I don't think people, once they start focusing on short-term price behavior, which is the nature of buying calls or leaps or speculating in index futures, once you start concentrating on that, I think you're very likely to take your eye off the main ball, which is just valuing businesses. So I don't recommend it. Charlie?
Well, this is a group of affluent investors, and I don't think many of them did it in leaps.
Yeah, it's certainly true. If we'd operated Berkshire with considerable borrowed money over the years, it would have done very much better than it has. But nobody knew what that amount of borrowed money would have, the appropriate level would have been, and it wouldn't have made any difference to us. I mean, we have just as much fun doing what we've done than if we'd owned it on leverage and it had been twice as much. I mean, it's not the way we approach it. If you have X and you think you're going to be way happier when you've got 2X, it's probably not true. You really ought to enjoy where you are at the point, and if you can make 12 or 15% a year, and you desire to save and you like piling it up, it'll all come in time. And why risk losing what you need, and have for what you don't need and don't have? It's never made a lot of sense to us.
Warren wrote a letter when they were developing the security options businesses, and he urged the civilization not to allow the new exchanges. And you can see how much attention they paid to him.
Yeah, the usual amount. Area 3.
Hi, my name is Greg Kolarch, a shareholder from Calgary, Canada, the home of Briax Minerals. My question for you is, the companies in the hazardous waste disposal industry have underperformed the market for about a decade now. Do you see any value in that area?
Well, we've never looked at that business. I'm familiar with the names of the companies, but that's been a business that I'd never looked at, and maybe Charlie knows more about it than I do. He almost asked to.
No, we have never really looked at the hazardous waste business. We think there's a lot of toxic waste in the securities market. Maybe we get our fill that way.
Okay. Over there on 2.
I'm Barbara Morrow from Wisconsin and New York. If you both live as long as I believe you will, it could happen that there'll be a year when you write 2 big checks for Super Cat claims when the market is throwing away things at really silly prices. Could you share your thinking about how much debt you would consider taking on to buy great businesses as cheap in that kind of a situation?
Well, if we had both a big hurricane in the Northeast or in Florida, and we had a big quake in California in the same year, and we had a financial market, the financial markets tanked, perhaps because of those events, but perhaps for other reasons, we would be thinking about ways, it might not be borrowing money directly, but we would be thinking about ways to buy securities if they got cheap enough. I mean, anytime securities get cheap, Charlie, you're thumping again here. Anytime securities get cheap, you know, we don't like to go to the office and not write a ticket. I mean, we certainly would have the ability to borrow some money. We would never borrow a ton of money relative to capital. We're just not set out that way. We don't want to disappoint anybody in this world. We don't even want to worry about disappointing anybody in this world. So we're not going to do that. But we have a lot of extra firepower overall, and I would say under almost any conditions that cause securities to get very cheap, we would find a way to buy some of them. Charlie?
The beauty of our situation is that it has enormous flexibility built into it. If something were large enough and cheap enough, we could stop writing super cats. We're measuring opportunities one against the other, and we understand the way the numbers interplay. And so we have a lot of different options. And that's a huge advantage. There's so many places in business life where you have practically no options at all. You're just in a channel that you have to waltz down the channel, and you don't have any options to do anything else. We have enormous options. We may not exercise them, but we have enormous flexibility.
Yeah, we know they're there, and there's no reason to push on anything now. At least we don't have any reason to push ourselves. But if it ever became advantageous to push somewhat, we would push, although never to a degree that in any way caused us to lose a minute of sleep about fulfilling every obligation we had.
In the domestic soft drink business, is it winner take all? I mean, is there room for three competitors? And honestly, does Dr. Pepper have a future?
Yeah, I would say Dr. Pepper has a future. I'll answer the second one. But sure, there's room for more than one. I think Coke's market share will go up pretty much year after year, but not, you know, we're talking tenths of a percent in that business, but tenths of a percent are important. The U.S. market is what? Must be 10 billion cases, so, you know, 1%'s 100 million cases. There will be, Dr. Pepper appeals to a lot of people. It's interesting how regional tastes can be. I mean, a Dr. Pepper will have a share in Texas that's, you know, far higher than it will be in Minnesota or something. But there are people that are going to prefer it. And the interesting thing, though, is that the high percentage of people that prefer cola, for example, although the cola percentages have gone down a little bit, the fastest growing big beverage at Coke is Sprite. Sprite has had huge gains in sales. It does well over 1 billion cases a year, and it sells very well in a whole bunch of countries. So you can make money with a soft drink company that doesn't dominate the business. You'll do a lot better with one that does dominate. But it's not a winner take all. It's not like two newspapers in a town of 100,000 or 200,000. There are certain businesses that are winner take all, clearly, but soft drinks are not one of them. It's 3:30. I thank you all for coming. I look forward to seeing you next year, and so long.
财富由不是来，家福需要您的爱心，菩萨保佑您。